Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's going to be revisiting Bjork for the first time in more than 20 years with a review of the new album Fossora. And I'm going to be contextualizing this album in a lot of different ways. The overarching themes that I find that are most interesting, I would say, is one of happy heartbreak, a kind of good, sad album, a kind of bittersweet album. But before I get more into that, I want to talk to you about my history with Bjork. Now listen, some people don't like the personal side. They just want the review. I got bad news for you. I don't give scores. I don't give grades. I just give thoughts. And some of the thoughts relate to my own experience. But I'll put in the description where you can skip ahead if you don't want to hear me talk about my history with Bjork. But it's actually pretty important, I think. Like, why am I a big fake fan of Bjork? Why was I a fake fan of Bjork for my entire life up until yesterday, when I heard and processed Fossora? So let me talk to you about my introduction to Bjork. So I was, back in 1993, 15, 16 years old, and my friend Keith played this song for me in his bedroom there on Selwyn Road in Belmont, Massachusetts. They've moved now. And I'm sitting there, and he plays this album for me. His dad, is friends with Greil Marcus, and he has, the super cool uncle, so Keith always had the coolest taste in music. But he played this, and I'm like, what the hell is this? That's a keyboard. Now, mind you, at this point, I am totally in the realm of alternative rock and classic rock, and all I listen to is WBCN, the classic rock station, or WFNX, the alternative rock station. And the one thing that I know is that music that has keyboards and drum machines is not rock, is not good, is not kosher. That's just weird Euro-poppy British techno trash. So he plays the first track off this album, Human Behavior, and I am laughing, and he's not laughing, and I am laughing. And then I'm realizing, I better take this seriously, because Keith is always right. He's always right about music. And so then I let my guard down a little bit and realize it's super interesting. The melody is cool. It's a female voice. At that point, I don't think I had a single album made by a woman in my entire collection. I think I must have seen the video on the alternative section of MTV, and then I realized, oh wait, something could be electronic and alternative at the same time. So this album wasn't just important to me as my introduction to Bjork, it was the first time I truly let my guard down and accepted the idea that music with keyboards and drum machines could be good music, or could be good non-rap music. Could be for more than techno and the Mortal Kombat soundtrack. So I bought this album, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. I also bought Post when it came out in 1995. Now, I don't have a copy of it in my hands. I lost it in the divorce, which is okay. It's a great album. It makes sense why that's the one I lost. And by the time we get to Post, I was listening before Spotify, but before you can see how often you listen to something. But it was probably my most listened to album back in 1995. And it reached the point where I was such a fanatic of Bjork that in 1996 she released a remix album. And this album, Telegram, came out in England. Only in England, or only in Europe. But you could buy it if you went and you bought the import CD. So this CD right here. Now, I worked at Blockbuster Video, a video store. I made $4.25 an hour. I then got promoted to manager, made $6.50 an hour. And I went to Newbury Comics in Harvard Square, and I bought this exact CD for $30. 5 hours of my labor to hear this remix album. That's how big of a Bjork fan I was. I liked her music, I liked her style, I was probably in love with her, or at least with the idea of her. She was sort of the ideal to which I aspired in any kind of partner that I might have. Mind you, at this point, I had never had a girlfriend up until my freshman year of college, all of high school. So Bjork held this really mystical importance to me. But still, you're going to learn I was a fake fan all along. You could start to tell maybe I was a fake fan by the fact I didn't love Homogenic that much. I liked it, but I didn't love it. Hunter was good and All Is Full of Love is good, but it didn't give me that excitement. She was starting to get too weird. Now the problem is, part of what I like about Bjork is that she's weird, but maybe she's getting too weird. Then she starred in the movie Dancer in the Dark, which I saw when I lived in France. I saw it twice. In the theater, Lars von Trier, tears running down my cheeks. I'm just crying so hard. The third time I watch it, I start to get mad at the movie because I realize it's kind of emotionally manipulative, and maybe Lars von Trier is not that great of a director after all, although Bjork's performance in it is quite great. By the time we get to Vespertine, August 2001, not a great time to release an album. I would have it here. I lost that one in the divorce as well. But it doesn't matter. I never would have listened to it. I listened to it probably once, maybe twice. And what were my problems? My problems were it's too avant-garde. It's too weird. There's no repeated melodies, or there might be some repeated melodies, but they're just so far out there. Too much of what they call today a vibe. Not enough, as they would say today, bops, okay? Like, the pop sensibility seemed to be gone. And her lyrics, they seem to be simultaneously and paradoxically improvised while overly researched, overly poetic, and overly spoken, and just a production that's just super duper wild. So back then, August 2001, I give up on Bjork. Now, I still listen to her old stuff. Sidebar, my favorite misheard lyric of Bjork, I still don't know what the real lyric is. Chairman Mao, please make love to me. Chairman Mao, please make love to me. I don't know what the real lyric is. And that's what I held on. I held on and I listened to Post before I lost the CD in the divorce. I listened to Debut. Hell, I listened to Telegram. And I even sometimes listened to Homogenic. But in general, I got lost because she got too weird. Now, you might be noticing behind me this image of Bjork and Neil Young. Kind of a weird pairing, right? Well, there's a story behind this image. I got this framed this way. It comes from the September 1995 edition of Spin magazine. Spin magazine was a rock and roll and alternative music magazine that was most popular in the 90s. And it happened to be that these two pictures, one of Bjork and one of Neil Young, were on different pages. But the way that you open up the magazine, you could actually see them at the same time. And I thought, this is great. Because this is back in 95. This is the post era. This is where I think I am the biggest Bjork fan in the world. And of course, I'm the biggest Neil Young fan in the world. A lot of Neil Young fans at this point had paired off because Neil Young got too weird. In the 80s, he got too weird. He started making electronic music and 50s music, and he just got too weird. And he lost all of his fake fans, Because there's one thing that I knew, and this is what I learned by loving Neil Young. Good artists never get weird. They just earn and use the freedom to become more of who they are. And that's how you lose fake fans, everybody. Kanye, Radiohead, they didn't get weird. They just became more of who they are. And it's okay if you don't like it. It's like when you date somebody, and the more you get to know them, you realize there's a limit. And like when you find out who they really, 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 really are deep down, you're kind of annoyed. And that's okay. You're not a real fan of that person. And hey, too many people were not real fans of Neil Young because when he got weird, they peeled off. You see where I'm going? Do you see the irony that I paired Neil Young with Bjork in this picture? I was the fake fan. I should have followed my own wisdom that I had with Neil Young, that I would have with Radiohead. Bjork didn't get too weird. She just became more of who she is. More of who she was on debut. It was always there. So when I listen to Fossora, I'm asking Bjork, personally, I doubt she'll ever see this, but I'm personally asking, please take me back. Bjork fans, please take me back. I was wrong. I was ignorant. Who knows why I gave up? But I gave up. And I missed. I missed out on a lot. Now, it happens to be my personal trajectory in music is around that time, around 2002, I stopped listening to new music. I got old. This happens, mid-20s music death. And so I didn't rediscover music until 2018. And her last album was 2017. So this is really my first chance to revisit who has Bjork been this whole time. And what I heard is a true masterpiece of an album. Just an absolute masterpiece of an album. So I'm going to go back, and you can tell me in the comments, please watch the video first and then see what it is that I like about this album and suggest to me which parts of her back catalog should I focus on if I really like this album. I mean, I know she did an album with Arca. How can I be such a big fan of Arca and also think that Bjork is too weird? Seriously, I'm such a loser. God, okay, I'm going to get done with this personal part. Okay, so this album. Everything that I said about Bjork being too weird is on this album. The unstructured melodies, the lack of predictable repetition, lyrics that seem both improvised and overly thought out, absolutely wild production. I should mention that I heard this album in a very agreeable way. So I was wearing this puppy right here. It's called a Baby Bjorn. And I had my newborn on my chest. And it's funny because it's like Baby Bjorn, Baby Bjork, you know? So I'm kind of sitting there and I'm bopping along and I'm listening to this music. And I'm just really lost in it. You know, because when you have a baby sleeping on your chest, you're just lost. You know, like you can't do much. So I'm sitting there and I'm listening. You're not lost, but I mean, like it's a very like warm feeling. It's a sort of transcendental feeling where you sort of transcend the planes of existence because you're so burrowed in and you're so connected to something that you love and need to protect, right? So, you know, I'm listening. It has all these elements. Like weird little things which would have totally bothered me back in 2002. Like she rolls all of her R's the entire album. The entire album she rolls her R's. But that's okay, I realize, because she's always sounded a little bit off. And she sounds off because English is not her first language. Of course, it's Icelandic. So, you know, when people sing in languages that are not their native tongues, there's inherently a falseness. And I think she embraces that falseness and emphasizes that falseness. It's not a bug, it's a feature, as the people like to say. And when you get past that, you just realize that she is a truly amazing lyricist. Not like a good lyricist, but an amazing lyricist. I'm going to get a lot more into detail with that as we go. Musically, it's unique. Now, people use the word unique all the time, okay? Unique cannot be qualified. Unique means one of one. I've never heard anything like this. It's like mostly like this interesting bass work and like electronic drums and kind of thumping drums and sort of aggravating soundscape that's electronic and inorganic, mixed with this obscenely organic clarinet, bass clarinet, maybe oboe. Listen, I don't know my woodwinds. I don't. I ask my kids. They help me. They know woodwinds. I don't know woodwinds. I think it's mostly clarinets, though. Point is, this great mixture of organic and inorganic sounds coming together, and then just with her voice. Now, what bothered me in the past was I got the sense that she didn't know how to write melodies, that she just is searching for a melody. You know, like the way she basically starts every song and she just starts singing. But I realized I thought of it differently this time. She's not searching. She's roaming. You know, she has this control over these 3 octaves, like complete and total mastery over these 3 octaves. And instead of being like, I don't know, Nelson or Adele or, you know, some kind of amazing singer like that who's like showcasing it and saying, listen to what I can do. She just uses this like she's like tell me if this makes sense. And smash the like bucket too and subscribe. Smash the like bucket, please. Please. This is going to be a good video. I don't know how long it's going to be. I think it's going to be long. Please smash the like bucket. Makes me happy. I see her voice as like walking, wandering, roaming. And I see the Icelandic fjords, and I sort of see the topography. We're going to get back to topography soon. The topography of Iceland, and I just sort of see her voice climbing and running and jumping and bounding all over the hills. I guess there aren't a lot of hills there. We'll talk a lot about Iceland coming up soon. There's 3 basic themes that dominate this album. One is love in the time of COVID, and I mean that love as individual love, like the love of a man and a lover, and then love of humanity itself, sort of making it through the difficult times of humanity. There are the themes of mourning the death of her mother, and there's the themes of watching her kids grow up. So this first theme, you know, is very, very connected to this concept of mushrooms, which really dominate. And that's why I have some shiitake mushrooms back there and some artwork that my daughter made. Very tied into this concept of connection and digging. So like part of the way that mushrooms work is they dig underground more to connect. So when we had this idea of COVID, like we all had to hunker down and just really like dig ourselves into the ground. So this concept of all of us being connected while seeming isolated underground, this hidden connection. Did I mention she's a great lyricist, not a good lyricist? This is amazing. The second theme is about the death of her mother, who died in 2018. My mother died in 2016. Still think about her every day. It actually would be her 80th birthday, I think on Friday. Happy birthday, Ma. So that's interesting because she's able to address it and then counterpoint it with this third theme of watching children grow up. And again, I'm helping one of my children. I have a baby, but also I'm helping one child shop around for colleges, right? Or look around for colleges. He's actually upstairs right now working on his application to Cal, okay? If you're on the board at Cal, let me know. Let him in. So like that bittersweet feeling of watching your kids move up and the bittersweet feeling of loving your mother and watching her pass and the bittersweet feeling of being isolated while also more connected with humanity. All these bittersweet feelings are what deliver this amazing sense of this kind of happy sadness or this sad happiness. And it's all extremely, extremely relatable, especially for me. So I'm going to, if you stuck with it and you watched my little personal bit, I think you'll see that in some ways I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this album, given my life experience. But that doesn't mean it's not universal. Like that's the thing, like even when you can't relate to music, and this is why I relate to hip hop so much. I can't relate to what their life is, but I can always relate to the nature of the emotions that they're expressing. So let's get to the album. And I'm going to start off with a stamp. Every album I give a stamp, which is an example song. It happens to be the first track off the album, Atopos. Click above the banana if you haven't seen the video or heard the song. This announces the ambition, the feeling of the album. Again, I don't use the word masterpiece for every album that I like. I only review albums that I like. I haven't used the word masterpiece, I think, since like maybe April. I think it was maybe Billy Woods was the last one I referred to as a masterpiece. But this really is. And it's also possible that she's been releasing masterpieces every couple of years and I've just been sleeping. So who knows? Wake up, Rip Van Winkle. So like this album it starts with like the voices and like multiple voices and they're a little bit off. And then we get to this sort of either Afro beat or reggaeton beat. And then there's these, I don't know, clarinets or oboes or bass clarinets, just this low woodwind, and then just dum 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 dum. Sometimes the bass will like triple up, and it's this like super aggressive production while super warm woodwinds, and then just her voice constantly roaming over the hills and towards the fjords and the black sands of the Rogue One Peninsula. She says, and by the way, she talks a lot about her music. Thank you, Bjork. Thank you, genius.com. Everyone makes fun of you, says you're bad. I think Genius can be great. It's especially great with the notes here because they've collected a lot of different things that she has said about this album. So she herself says that she's been listening to a lot of Afrobeat coming from Central and East Africa, and then said that she programmed the basis, and then later they did some of it in Barcelona. So she says it's not unreasonable to think there's also reggaeton in there. Every time I call something reggaeton and it's Afrobeat, people get pissed at me. Hey, Bjork says it's kind of both. I'm going to let it be. She says it's a bottom-ended bass world with 6 bass clarinets digging us into the ground. And that's the thing, this mushroom thing that's going on here, where we're digging, Fossora, right? Actually, the word for gravedigger in French is fossoyeur. I think it's kind of close. This sort of idea of like digging a grave, but also digging a hole. And again, we have to understand about this album, the more we're digging, the more we're connected. That's the concept of the album. Did I mention she's a great lyricist? Very cerebral. But like it just keeps building. So it's like a dance song. I'm listening to the song and I'm dancing and I'm sitting there, with my baby and the baby Bjork. And I'm kind of sitting there and like it just keeps dum 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 dum. And then it kind of cuts out and it's just vocals and we get this emotional center that settles into the outro of the song, the kind of thesis of the song. Hope is a muscle that helps us to connect. And then just has this amazing, insane instrumental outro. Awesome instrumental outro. This like broken up bit and like the woodwinds and the cutting and the back and the forth and the panning, the left and the right and the right and the left. So that's Atopos. I'm not done. You thought you were going to tell a French professor that you wrote a song inspired by Roland Barthes, and I wasn't going to go off. Oh, settle in, everybody. The song is called A Topos. Comes from the Greek a, out of, topos, place, out of place. And she says this has to do with Roland Barthes and Roland Barthes' writing on A Topos. So what did I do? I printed out the copies of discourse on a, how do I say it in French? Fragments from a lover's discourse. Okay, this is it in French. You can see there. I printed it out and took notes. And what I'm going to try to do is share with you the concepts that are in Roland Barthes' writings that are reflected in this music. In some ways, they don't go as well together as you might want them to. In some ways, they do. So a brief summary of this little chapter from these fragments that Barthes published in 1977. So he takes the concept of atopos from Socrates, who he relates it to a kind of eroticism as well. It is the inclassable, the originality that keeps coming. I cannot place it, I cannot classify it, he says, because it is precisely the unique. Précisément l'unique. I told you unique was an important word. The singular image. It cannot be taken in any stereotype. Now he says the word stereotype. Don't think like stereotype, like white people can't dance. It's not that kind of stereotype. Scottish people are cheap. Okay? That's not the kind of stereotype. He's going back to the original etymology of the word stereotype, which comes from printing, which comes from stereo, meaning like solid, and type, which, like type, which actually means like a strike. It's like a solid strike that leaves a solid image. A stereotype is a solid, repeatable image. So the atopos is the opposite of the stereotype, the singular image, as he calls it, image singulière. Okay? So, this is his relationship towards somebody that he loves, that he's a lover, at least, where he sees this person and he feels that this desire cannot be classified. It is outside of a type. It is unquantifiable. Okay? And he goes on to talk about the atopy of the others. He relates it to the sense of innocence. He keeps on talking about the word innocence because it's something new. He then sort of goes on to despair that he can never be atopos. Okay? He says, Je ne me sens jamais atopos, mais plutôt classé. So I can never see myself as atopos. But this is where it gets interesting. This is where it connects to Bjork. Je devine que le vrai lieu de l'originalité n'est ni l'autre ni moi, mais dans notre relation elle-même. I have discovered that the real place of originality, that is to say the real atopos, the unique place, out of place, atopos, not stereotype, atopos. The real place of originality is not in the other, the person who he sees, who he feels is atopos, nor in me. It is our relationship itself. It is the way that we relate ourself. That's what the song's about. It's not about some guy who she sees who makes her feel this way. It is about how this relationship, this love, this feeling, this connection is the thing that is out of place. And in the context of COVID, in the context of place and being stuck and digging underground, it all sort of makes sense. Then we get to the lyrics, we get to the second verse. If we don't grow outward towards love, we implode inwards towards destruction. If my plant doesn't reach towards you, there's an internal erosion towards all. Pursuing the light too hard is a form of hiding. So it ends up being this sort of universal relational meditation on love, that's where the love is. It's not the other and it's not me. It's in our relation. That's the beauty. And when we dig down and then we connect, like mushrooms. You see, he ends it right here, discussing how, when I'm in love, like everyone else, I can be jealous, bored, frustrated, like everybody. But once the relationship is original, the stereotype is gone away, evacuated, and jealousy, by example, can no longer have a place in this relationship without place. Sans topos, without topo, without place, without discourse. That's another part about this whole thing, about the idea of us all being mushrooms, is mushrooms don't talk, but they communicate with each other, right? There's a sort of communication system that they grow. So, atopos. It's fun, by the way. Just look it up. Oh, and sometimes people ask me, how do I learn more about literary criticism and all that? This book right here is just great. Beginning Theory by Peter Barry. I think it's on Amazon. I'm not a sponsor, but don't. There's some books you can listen to on audiobooks. Some books you can't. Just buy this book. Just get out a pencil, write it up. You'll learn all about structuralism, post-structuralism, all that stuff. It's a very, very useful book. Okay. So, that was Atopos, the first song. Okay, I've already asked you to smash the like bucket. Maybe tell me if you thought that was cool, the Barthes thing. Did I go too far talking about Roland Barthes? I get very excited. And, I've written papers on Roland Barthes. Not published, but, I've written them. And he's one of the people that really got me into literary criticism. Okay, moving on to the next song, Ovule. Starts off with just a voice and this keyboard. And the thing that she does a lot on this album is sometimes you can program a keyboard where the sounds are human voices. Okay? You know that trick. You've played with the keyboard before. And I think this is on purpose, again, because it's part of this weird organic, inorganic play. It creates a uncanny feeling, unheimlich, to get back to the world of literary criticism, where it's like it sounds like a human voice, but there's something artificial in it. So she's playing a lot with that, with the artificial and the non-artificial. Eventually, these super fractured drums come in, they cut in and out, more this kind of reggaeton style, almost like rap style horns at the end of each phrase. I know that sounds crazy, but listen, like Industry Baby. If you listen to Industry Baby the way the horns are in there, and then you listen to the horns here, no, not Industry Baby, I'm sorry, the Baby Keem song, Family Ties, Family Matters, Family Ties, okay. Family Feud, bam, 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 bam. It's that kind of horns. I don't know. Lyrically, she's just going into something kind of very deep. This is the thing, she doesn't rhyme. She doesn't rhyme at all. And that is part of what gives this feeling that she is improvising very deep thoughts. Okay? So, like, she said on Instagram, and I found this on Genius as well, Ovule is for me a definition of love. It is about meditation, about us as lovers walking around the world, and I imagine two spheres or satellites following us around. One above us that represents ideal love, one below us representing the shadows of love, and we talk to ourselves, and we walk around the third sphere of real love where everyday morning meet in the kitchen sink loves in. Okay. She sounds kooky, idiosyncratic, talking about ovules. She's not. She's just talking about ideal love and the shadow of ideal love, and then the real love, which is somewhat more mundane. Like, that's a totally comprehensible thought. It's not that weird. She happens to be talking about ovules, which is weird, and eggs, which is weird. Later, she talks about this and says, sorry, I'll get to it later then. But, like, really what she's describing is a lot what she's describing in the first song. So you get lost in the weirdness of it. And you don't actually connect, at least I did, back when I was a fake fan of Bjork, before I was a real fan of Bjork. I'm going to rank the Bjork albums that I know. Number 1 is Fossora. I'm going to go with Homogenic, Debut, Telegram. And then the soundtrack to Dancer in the Dark. She has these very developed, complex ideas about very understandable and relatable human experience. And then she sings them in an unexpected way that's very deeply, deeply poetic, but at the same time does not betray that level of work. How you work over a phrase and you turn a phrase and you figure out how to say it. That's often why it leads to rhyming. There's no rhyming. And let me give you a very specific example with this song. She says the last verses are about the future, how the ideal love you carried from your childhood can be a heavy architecture that gets in the way. but heartbreaks perhaps rid you of that. So she uses the word architecture, and so you think she's being a weirdo, but it makes sense because when you're a child, your concept of love is formed, and that can be something that you carry with you. Instead of saying it's something heavy, instead of saying it's something that you carry with you, instead of saying it's a rock that you carry on your back, or it's a building that you carry on your back, which she could say, which would make sense and be easy, she says the ideal can be heavy architecture. So you have to be spry, nimble of thought and say, okay. And so this is what she says, how all of those big thoughts, which is interesting, that heartbreak, my first girlfriend, I met right around this time. I used to listen to this with her because she liked electronic music. And when we broke up, my whole world fell apart because I thought I knew what love was and how love was going to save me. And I realized that it didn't work, but actually it was healing because that was a broken sense of what love really was. So, when I was here's the lyrics. When I was a girl, I felt love was a building I marched towards, but deadly demonic divorces demolished the ideal. So it's about the freeing nature of destroying some kind of ideal. Because the real goal is in that real, the everyday morning meet in the kitchen love. All right? It's not that weird. She just has a funny accent and uses words like mycelia. The next song is called Mycelia, which is instrumental. Reminds me kind of Laurie Anderson, maybe even Meredith Monk, who's an experimental artist and performer. My mother was personal friends with Meredith Monk. They went to school together. Kind of cool. I met her once. Also, a little bit kind of Philip Glass, kind of like weird voices. Again, these voices programmed into the keyboard to create an artificial real feeling, that Unheimlich thing. It's also kind of playful and fun. Like when it gets super low, it feels kind of cheesy. And this is the thing. It's called mycelia, which is like the way that mushrooms expand outwards. And I'm going to say it. I kind of understand what she's getting at, okay? I sort of understand what she's saying with all of this mushroom stuff. This song is an instrumental, and I kind of get it. The spiritual quality of the mushrooms that she is outlining for me, I am starting to understand. I have a complicated relationship with mushrooms. I'm a straight edge guy. I don't do drugs. So usually if I see someone celebrating mushrooms, I think, oh, I got it. The doors of perception. Loser. That's what I generally think. But I think it goes much deeper than that. And especially with music like this or art like this that my daughter made, I think you can see that. Interestingly, while I'm in the process of name dropping, my cousin is actually a very successful modern artist, Roxy Payne. Look him up online. And one of his big breakout pieces was he made mushrooms. Like he made entire mushroom fields. Like he made them from hand and they looked like a mushroom field. And that reminds me of this music because it's this weird thing of the organic and the inorganic kind of going together. And it's sort of simultaneously, it's like an inorganic celebration of the organic. Yep, that tracks. Sorry, I don't have a script. I just have notes, and that was not in my notes. I needed to take a second to make sure that it tracks and that that's what I actually think. Yes, an inorganic celebration of the organic. So, my daughter made her own version of it. She's never met my cousin, but there you go. So, we then get to the next song, Sorrowful Soil. So we're moving away from the love area, and we're now heading into the mourning. She calls this a eulogy. It sounds almost like medieval choral voices, sort of a cappella until eventually some weird sub-bass. So many voices. Too many voices? I don't know. This feels like we're watching a play or something, or Greek chorus, and everyone is singing all together. And these lyrics, in a woman's lifetime, she has 400 eggs, but only 2 or 3 nests. Into sorrowful soil, our roots are dug. You really get this sense of pain and mourning and loss. It ends with these lyrics. Now, I gotta tell you, this album has made me cry multiple times. So I'm not gonna cry on camera because I generally don't. I have once or twice. But when she says over and over again, you did your best, you did well. That is like literally the goal of parenting. If your kids can say, You did your best. You did well. What's implied in you did your best? It's implied it wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. There were difficulties. You did your best. Not you are the best, but you did your best. Implied in that is a certain amount of failure. You did well is the acknowledgement that she was successful. So when I think about my mother, and I wrote an entire album for her. It's on my Bandcamp. It's kind of an interesting idea. I did it before she died. You did your best and you did well would be the nicest thing that I could say to her. Because obviously she had her flaws and her failings, but everyone does their best, but not everybody does well. So that's this amazing first half. And then the back half starts off with a gong and then these strings. We get the song Ancestress. Again, she keeps inventing words. There's just voice and violin. This is just a vehicle for the songs. This is a further... So I was going to say eulogy, and I was going to say for her mother, but apparently she explains that this has to do with an Icelandic tradition. With a grafskrift, which is where one writes about someone's life, someone who died. And it directly accounts, and it basically gives lists of their professions, their partners, and she describes this as a very patriarchal thing, because you'll describe some man and who the partners that they've had and their professions, and just kind of a list, kind of a dry list, which she sees as very patriarchal, because obviously it's mostly focused on the men. But this is for her mother, and in a way, it really is just a grafskrift, where she just gives traits of her mother, that you sang to me, and that was nice, and you were dyslexic, and then she talks about her illness. But it just gets so much deeper and more personal. Even though it's a list, it's just verse after verse after verse after verse. There's this heartbreaking earnestness in it. My skull is my cathedral, where this matrimort takes place. Matrimort is another word that she exists, which means death of mother. When I was a girl, she sang for me in falsetto lullabies with sincerity. I thank her for her integrity. Jesus Christ, I'm not going to cry. I'm going to come close again, because it's such a beautifully well-stated thing. She doesn't rhyme. Thank God she doesn't rhyme. She wouldn't have... Okay, I guess integrity and sincerity rhymes still. My skull is my cathedral where my matrimor takes place. Like, that's where this is happening, because these are memories of her mom. That's where it is. And then her son comes on to do a duet with her? Are you kidding me? Seriously. Like, how much more beautiful can you get? Like, it moves me so much because it is such a good... Both these songs together. And I don't know anything about her mother. Apparently she was an ecologist. I don't know. I don't know who she was. I don't know. I don't know who Mrs. Bjork is. I don't know. But this is such a wonderful tribute that, like, if I were her, this would be the greatest possible tribute you could give. A frank assessment of my capacities as a parent, being told that I did well, and then having my daughter in a duet with my grandson. Beautiful bells happening here, some synth bass at the very, very end. At the very, very end, we get some synthesizers in here, and then this bell, and then a moment of silence, a true moment of silence. Next song is called Federer í Fjörum, which is in Icelandic. I may seem like I'm making fun of Icelanders. I'm not. One of my best friends, Stephen Brahi Danley, is, I think, a first generation, second generation Icelandic immigrant. So he loves Iceland. He talks about it a lot. He still has family there. My kids went to Iceland with my ex-wife, and they have a lot of good experiences there. It's a very interesting country. But what's interesting about this song is that she's just quoting this Icelandic poem, this 18th century Icelandic poem. And when she talks about it, she says that folk songs have complex lyrics and melodies, and that she's continuing the tradition. So she's essentially apologizing for that thing that annoyed me when I was a dum-dum, and I thought that she was too lame. Like, she's saying that she's basically continuing that. And it's again, the complexities of this album. So it's sort of just trying, because there is also a folk song based on this poem. But the keyboard that she's using is very clearly a keyboard, but it's imitating an organ sound. And the thing about Iceland, and this is funny because my son said this. We were eating dinner together yesterday, and he spent, I think, 3 weeks there. And he's a student of the world, right? Again, if you're on the college board, let me know. If you're in admissions at Cal, let me know. But he was like, Icelanders really don't like living there. It's really rough. They are super unhappy there. that was his take. And if you listen to this poem, it makes sense. Here's the translation that I found online. Thank you again to genius.com. Beautiful 'tis in the fjords, when the Saviour gives gentle weather, the hay green in the fields, grass and halibut refreshed. But when the winter that our way one day does blow, I know no worse place in this worldly place, man and creatures then die. And then there's a gong. Okay? So like, a little bit saying, hey, when it's nice out, this is a cool place to be, but other than that, it's too rough. I mean, the things that my kids described to me was that they would be like somewhere and there were like no trees, and the wind was blowing so hard they would almost lift off the ground. A rough place to live. But obviously, in coordination with this love of her mother, it's also about her motherland, about her homeland, trying to connect with her roots. It has a very concrete place in this album, which leads into the song Victimhood, which is the worst song on the album. It's still good, but it's a bit laborious. Like at this point, I needed a change of this kind of downbeat mode. I wanted to change, which I'll get with the next song. I do like how it leads directly from the last song. Starts these kind of woodwinds. It sounds like a film score, and then a Casio bossa nova beat, like a pre-programmed bossa nova beat. You press the button on the little keyboard, and and then we get to the second half of the album. Opens up with Allow, which is very upbeat, has all these flutes. According to Genius, this song was supposed to be on the last album. So this also doesn't quite fit. I don't know. I think this and the previous song, if it were up to me, they would not be on the album. We just skip right to Fungal City, where we're right back to the principle of the album, the concept of the album. The main reason that Allow bugs me, and lyrically it's quite interesting. I like this voice, Emily Nichols, like the way it interacts with this mess of flutes. It's interesting hearing flutes, but it's not in the context of the album with these low woodwinds, which we get here with Fungal City. Oboes or clarinets, I don't know, going with these weird bumping rhythms behind. Serpent with Feet is collaborating, lots of great collaborators on this album, kind of R&B style, clashing sounds in the back. I am enraptured, it's like nice plucked strings as well, and then more of this stuff, like this, like the term I keep using is attacking insanity. It's like metallic sounds, but then it's undergirded with these like strings, so it's like very aggressive and calming at the same time. Fungal City, subterranean curve, the forest floor, more of this mushroom theme. The chorus is... Okay, I've spent a long time with this chorus. The chorus is 2 lines. His capacity for love is enormous. His vibrant optimism happens to be my faith too. Why does that fascinate me? His capacity for love is enormous. First of all, it's a great thing to say about a lover, about a person. His vibrant optimism happens to be my faith too. We can take the word faith, meaning like religious belief. But faith is actually what you believe that cannot be proven, right? That's what faith is. Faith in God is believing something that cannot be proven. So her faith, it's not her belief system. Her belief system is not vibrant optimism. Her faith is vibrant optimism. So you can have a dark and pessimistic worldview while still having a faith that is vibrant and optimistic. So I am totally with her on this. I was talking about this with my wife this morning. I think that's one way to work together, that our faith is vibrant optimism. Like that is what we believe in that cannot be proven. Okay? This isn't about Jesus or Allah. This is about believing in vibrant optimism. Whew. Next song is called Trolla Gaba. More vocal weird sounds. I should have mentioned on the opening track, Atopos Kasimin is the collaborator. She's doing great with collaborators. I mean, I don't remember how much she collaborated in her first couple albums, but I can't wait to listen to her stuff with Arca. and just Cassiman, I guess, is the person who's doing a lot of this sort of odd instrumentations. Leads to the next song, Free Fall, maybe the most direct song on this album, Into Your Arms. I feel like she sings a lot about falling into people's arms. Gorgeous rising strings. What I love here is the way she plays with strings. So they're played strings for the beginning, just strings and voice, and then she uses these violins, I think mostly violins, plucked to create a kind of rhythm. And she kind of inverts it. So it's like boom, bet, boom, bet, boom, bet, boom. But there's like multiple over them, all kind of together, like networks of mycelia underground, making little mushroom. Fossora is the first song. Is the title track. It's not the first song. She invented this word. Seriously, I am such a boob. How did I stop listening to Bjork? I know why. It's misogyny. Truly, it is. I have a serious historical problem with listening to and taking female voices seriously. I don't say that because I'm proud of it or because I support it. I'm just taking a frank inventory of my weaknesses, and that is one of my weaknesses. That's the sort of why did I follow Neil Young and not Bjork? Because on some level I am unwantingly a sexist pig. The fact that she plays around with language and creates words and makes words that should exist, like Fossora should exist, that's a beautiful concept. I read a quote from her again from Genius where she said, I described the sound to the musicians as my mushroom album, tree roots and mycelium spreading deep into the soil. And artists are important. We need to respect artists, and we need to support artists, and we need to protect them. And even if the artwork is not telling of the people and of the struggles of this, even if the art is very kind of high concept or very cerebral, like that's where a lot of culture is made. That's where a lot of our greatest work is done, even if it's far away from the working people, right? I love both kinds of art, kind of realist, terre à terre, grounded art. But then also, I love super fancy art gallery, very complex ideas. And this album really feels like a true artist, somebody who's been supported, someone who's been nourished, exercising this concept of mushrooms in music form. And much like an artist provides, show notes, like an artist will write blurbs and will describe what they're doing, right? Music is one of the few kinds of art where that's not expected. In fashion, apparently, I learned this off of Bliss Foster's channel. You're supposed to, when you do a runway show, you're supposed to write up what you're doing, an artist statement. When you're an artist, you're definitely supposed to do an artist statement. So why aren't musicians asked to do an artist statement? Well, it's because we don't take music as art as seriously as we should. So this is the concept, and it really works. And then when you understand that, the whole album makes sense with these low clarinet or bassoon, I don't know which one, or oboe, I don't know which one. That smart, becomes like the digging and these beating drums and all these kind of different rates and just this chorus over and over again, Fossora, Fossora. And then the second verse is kind of distorted panning left and right. And then by the end, it's a full-on club banger. Doop, 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 doop. And then you read everything all together and you read all the lyrics all together and you realize it's a COVID perseverance anthem. And again, it's this concept that we need to all be connected by mycelia. Mycelium. Agricola. And then the album ends with Her Mother's House. As this is the song that makes me cry. I cannot listen to this song without crying. I just cannot tell you how emotional this song makes me. And I need to tell you, okay? If you've never watched this channel before, welcome. Please subscribe. If you're this far in the video, you're gonna like my channel, okay? But I think a lot about parenting and about being a parent. And it makes me very emotional. I have a complicated relationship with my father, and I had a complicated relationship with my mother when she was alive, all that, but I think a lot about being a parent. And part of what I love about being a parent is how bittersweet it is. That every single time a kid grows up and does something, you're happy and you're sad. Just yesterday, my newborn daughter of 5 weeks moved out of her newborn onesies. Had to put them all in a little bag and put them away to either donate or whatever, or go to another baby somewhere else. And my little baby is never going to be a newborn again. She's going to be an infant, and then she's going to be a toddler, And she's going to be an elementary schooler, and then a middle schooler, and then a high schooler, and then a college. And this feeling is just not talked about in music. Seriously? I don't care for musicals. In general, musicals bother me. I'm not saying that I'm better than musicals. I'm saying I personally don't like them. But Fiddler on the Roof, Sunrise, Sunset, go to hell if you think there's a better song. That song, Sunrise, Sunset. The amount of times in my life I have seen my own children do something for the first time and thought, sunrise, sunset. It is unbelievable. And that's what the song is about, because she has 2 kids. So right as I gave up on her, okay, back in 2002, 2001, she had kids. And they are going away. And this is what she says about the song. I'm trying to make fun of how clumsy and clingy you can be. When your kids are leaving, you gather up your courage to do a really graceful goodbye. And of course, for 5 years, you're still saying goodbye and they're still coming back because you have to help them through things. So asking my daughter to do the song was really trying to make fun of myself, saying, I'm doing my best, forgive me. You're trying not to be overprotective, and then you find you're underprotective in other areas. You can't win. That's it. You can't. You try to not be overprotective, and then you end up being underproductive, and you just can't do it. All you can do is hope that when you go, they say, you did your best, you did well. So the organ starts, and you hear her breath and these voices, and this clarinet is just perfect. And then her daughter does the duet, and her daughter's voice is beautiful. It's very inspired. It's very clearly the same. The voice comes from the same place. Even with the rolled R's, everything is so perfect. And then this is the chorus, the first chorus. The more I love you, and then the daughter responds, the more you love me, the stronger you become, the stronger I become, the less you need me, and the less I need you. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's parenting in a nutshell. And you don't realize that when you have little babies. But when you have teenagers and when you're trying to figure out, what time should I tell him to get back home? Well, he's going to have to figure out this stuff eventually. So I'm not going to set a curfew. Oh, he came back at 1. That didn't work. So I will have to set a curfew. But I need to make sure he has the tools. The more you love them, the stronger they become, the less they need you. That's what it is. And it just kind of even goes on and talks about like the importance of a moist voice instead of a hard voice. Like this poetic thing. Like I understand what she's saying because I'm a parent and I get it. You can't have a dry voice with your kids. You need to have a moist voice. I can't explain it. I can't. I'm sorry. I cannot intellectually explain what she is talking about. But I can emotionally tell you she is completely right. When I speak to my kids with a crisp voice, with a dry voice, it's not good. It needs to be moist. Such a beautiful song. And the clarinet, the way the clarinet comes in and sometimes extends the melodies, hits the same note as the voices, the emotional weight of this. Okay. So, these are my Patreons. And I'm going to tell you a story, a funny story. So I want you to look at the Patreons because they're going to give me the money. I'm going to go to the record archive this weekend and I'm going to buy this album. Sorry about those new guys down there. I'm going to make a new sheet eventually. But I'm going to tell you a funny story about mushrooms. So my wife, one of her best friends, is who I like a lot. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. He's also kind of a goofball. So he gets really into mushroom hunting, okay? Shrooming, Really, really, really into it. So we're walking around Walden Woods, outside of Boston. That's where he used to live. And so we're walking. And he's this really smart guy, and he's talking to me all about how much he loves mushrooms, like how great mushrooms are, and how much he loves them. And he picks up a mushroom, and he looks at it, and he goes like this, kind of sniffs it and looks at it. And then every single time I go, hey, what kind of mushroom is that? He goes, I don't know. He throws it away. And then the next time comes, and he picks it up. He looks at it. Oh, what kind of mushroom is that? I don't know. And then he throws it away. It's very funny because why is he the smartest person that I know or one of the smartest people that I know? because he's so smart that even though he should have an ego and he should say he knows something when he doesn't know what kind of mushroom it is. So he's just sitting there and he's appreciating it and he's learning about it, but he's totally comfortable with his ignorance, which is the state of true wisdom, is being comfortable with your ignorance. So please tell me in the comments what Bjork songs and albums should I get acquainted with, because that is a place of great ignorance for me. Until next time, there's the camera.